Hello. All right. Audio's good. All right. So, hi everybody. This is a recording. We're gonna just go over some of our home station training. Specifically, the recording right now is for Resource Management Block One and Block Two. Um, we are obviously I'm not. We're doing a virtual UTA this weekend. First time in my career we've ever had to do something like this, and this is because of the COVID-19 outbreak, and it's been interesting. So that's why I'm at home, this, and that's why I have a beard and I'm not in my uniform. So I hope you guys are taking care of yourself, and we appreciate what you're doing. So I'm just gonna get into the training, and we're just gonna go from there. Specifically in Block One, it's around associated or appropriated funds and non-appropriated funds, and this is all within the environment of a contingency environment, an austere environment. And for me, my experience, I've been in services most of my career. I was I started my career as a cook in services at the 934th. Was in storeroom. Spent a couple few years in lodging, and then I cross trained to be a paralegal. I was over at the 133rd Air National Guard. Um, I worked in their headquarters as a paralegal for 6 years, and then I decided to come back to services. So and everyone asks me, why would you do that, and I always just tell them, it's where I needed to be. The people, the experiences, and everything. So um, I've enjoyed it. I've also had the opportunity um, to do things I like to do, which is be around, train people, and mentor people, and also I've had the opportunity recently to deploy in an austere environment. So it really, I have a good basis for this training, and hopefully you get something out of it. So we're gonna just move along. I'm gonna turn my cam off, and pay attention because I'm gonna be throwing out some keywords out there for some of you guys, so you guys can use those words to report in that you guys actually watched and paid attention to the training. So I appreciate it. Let's get going. All right. So yeah, this is home station training. This is to provide reoccurring basic knowledge and skills required for the force support squadron. This is to kind of basically supplement what we do at Silver Flag, which is more applying what we learn here in home station training. The objective for this part is to identify appropriated and non-appropriated fund procedures in a contingency environment. This is that is really key when we're talking about this training. We're not talking about, though we can apply some of it home station where we're at in our, in the DFAC, or where we're at over in our fitness center at the 934th. But really, this is for like if we were to deploy in a contingency environment. The this is what we're trying to focus on. The big key here, or my experience is, I was in, for most of you are aware that I was in Manda Bay, Kenya, a very small base. Not it was it wasn't a robust base. Uh, it was a forward operating base, very small. There was only a few services personnel. I was there as the services lead. I reported to a mission support flight commander, and so you never know in your career that you will be, selected as the subject matter expert of serve any all things everything services. So For me, it was a great experience, but it would with some of this stuff, we really had to pick up and figure it out on the go, and I don't know, it was good. Anyways, so enough about that. Let's go into there's we're not going to be doing the written evaluation. We're just going to go through a lot of stuff. And just make sure you're paying attention because we're going to give out some keywords throughout the course of the training. There's about 35 slides, so we got quite a bit on these blocks. We're going to go over NAF accounting, appropriated fund, non-appropriated accounting system, purchasing, cash, and internal controls. For the big piece here, so for NAF accounting, these are the areas we're going to go through. I'm not going to reiterate because we're going to just basically just jump right in here. So with sources of fund, with non-appropriated funds, you got to understand that there's a difference between non-appropriated funds and appropriated funds. Appropriated funds are money that is provided through acts of Congress, through budgets, Air Force budgets, all that stuff, that the money comes through those channels and gets allotted for specific functions, okay? It's very key to understand the difference between these two as we go through this training. So non-appropriated funds, this is what we're going to be talking about in this section, is money generated not from that. So money generated, maybe you have like a NAF sales, maybe you have there's an AFES operation that gets that generates money through sale of merchandise or whatnot. That's considered money that's generated through other activities and not money specifically allocated by Congress through Air Force budgeting and whatnot. So now we're talking about non-appropriated fund accounting, NAF accounting. There's several sources. Isolated unit funds, they come from the U.S. Air Force Services Activity Central Funds Budget. And they're paid in a form of per capita allocation. Generally, bases, lodging operations are non-appropriated fund operations. That money that lodging operation, say at the 934th, generates, pays for the operation of the facility, but some of that money then gets allocated to the Air Force Services Activity Central Funds budget. So it may leave the base and then be allocated differently. I know that we get funds from AFES, and those get allocated as well. And where I was at in Kenya, at Ramstein had their AFES, and they would get an allotment of funds, and then those would get dispersed out to all the bases within their AOR. So our base would get, I can't remember, it was like something like $7,000 a year or something. So it was actually a lot, and actually we were actually surprised how much we had allocated towards us. So we could use that to buy certain things, and we'll go into what the funds are, what you're able to buy. But that's just an example of sources of income. There's local fees, charges, proceeds from sales of merchandise if you have a kind of operation like that. Contributions and donations, and then other sources of income. Basically, just money that's obtained not through appropriated channels. All right, so there is, we're going to go over some non-appropriated fund resource and property manager responsibilities. Basically, we have to understand what we're responsible for. The appropriated funds, managers are responsible for appropriated facilities, the dining facility, and all Air Force operations are appropriated funds. That's why there's a lot of separations of, why certain people can't go in the DFAC, because those are for specifically for that the money that is allocated specifically for that purpose. So it's good to understand that, and the difference, and that the appropriated fund custodian, the person that manages those funds, has different responsibilities. All right. Life of the fund file. So each deployed location has to establish this. We have to remember that we are handling money, and we need to be responsible for the money, and we need to make sure that the money is transparent as possible. So if anyone ever had to question it, they could see exactly this is this is how the money was originated, where the money originated from. This is how the money was used, and all the way up through when we decided to maybe end an activity and got rid of that, so we no longer have that. And then this is what we did with the money. So that's important to know. Life of the deployment. So you have the life of the fund, and then the life of the deployment file. Again, established at each deployed location. It's permanent. It is a permanent internal control for appropriated funds, providing chronology of selected activities, expenditures. All right, content continuity folder. I just need to make sure that we're on the right track here on something. Okay. The continuity folder. Basically, most of us should be familiar with the continuity folder, but some of us might not. A continuity folder is basically the how to do your job, and it's used to basically give to the next person down the road that might take over your job, so they understand what are your responsibilities, what is going on in this kind of an accounting environment, how was this operated, maybe who are some people I need to reach out to if I need help and whatnot. So that's pretty much the continuity folder, and that goes into basically most operations. Everyone should have a continuity folder that they can pass on to the next person. It should reflect all operations for the site, recreation program, revenue generating programs, and unit fund. Yep. All right. Special morale and welfare and official representation fund purposes, permissible expenditures, prohibited expenditures. I'm not going to go too much into this, but just to understand that these funds can only be used for certain things. You can't use them. You might have a little bit more flexibility. The SM&W, I'm not 100% sure on, but my understanding when dealing with certain funds is that, and like the IUF fund, you can only use it for certain things, and they wouldn't let you use it for other things. And we could use it for giveaways, but we couldn't auction them off, have rests, buy a TV from the AFIs with the IUF funds, and then see how much money we can get from that. That's it gets into a lot of other issues. So just and then the permissible expenditures, prohibited. Just understand there's ways to use the funds and not to use them. So there's a lot of resources available. When I was out in Kenya, I had someone at the wing that was really responsible for the whole program. I could always rely on if I had any questions on it. Changing custodians and activity managers. This is pretty important. I actually, when we were out there, I actually set up the first AFIS operation, and so we had to do some forms they had to fill out. I do some training, understand the process, and so I kind of went through all this stuff. And then when I left there, I had to make sure that the person that was taken over had the appropriate authorization, that they had to be a specific rank, and there's rank requirements on some things. Um, the lost her, yeah, and so then also what you want to do is before you give stuff over, you should go through all the equipment, any equipment that's purchased. So for example, our IUF funds was mostly made to buy stuff for like giveaways for events and whatnot. So we would do like like a bingo event, and we would just basically give out a lot of the items that we would get obtained through IUF funds. So that is important to basically track all that stuff, and report any lost or damaged stuff. Specifically on the AFES operation we had, if we got a shipment in and we had damaged goods, they would actually, we would have to return or come up with a plan what to do with it, the product, and then we would get reimbursed for that. So that's really important to understand. Concessionaire operations. Yeah, I mean you can do all kinds of stuff. You just got to do it right. So concessionaire, if you have a concessionaire operation, just make sure that you understand what the that this is basically just to explain that you might have a concessionaire operation to sell like concessionaire items, and that might be something you might need to be aware about when it comes to non-appropriated funds. All right. So that was the end of chapter 1, and as we were talking about, the going through everything, we actually had some key words we were supposed to talk about, and you guys are supposed to know. And the first word is communication. So that's your first magic word. So take a note of that. The chapter questions are in your handouts that you guys have in in our Google Drive. Feel free to look at those and challenge yourself on that. So we'll just kind of keep moving. All right. NAF budgeting. So you have responsibilities, right? Budgeting responsibilities. Kind of what we kind of basically talked somewhat about it, like a good high level overview. Your if you're in charge of a NAF operation, you just got to make sure that you're planning right, you're transparent as possible, and we're going to go into some of that stuff. So you have operational responsibilities, administrative responsibilities, policy responsibilities. So basically, in a nutshell, that you need to make sure that this operation is run soundly, that it does provide its purpose. If it's a cash operation, you got a lot of cash to deal with. Administratively, a lot of administrative responsibilities, documentation, accounting practices, and then policy responsibilities, ensuring that you have the up-to-date responsibilities and can there are up-to-date policies, and you're applying the policies correctly, whether it's AFIs, whether it's local policy, whether you have, like in my environment, we had a wing that had their own requirements, or the MAGCOM had their own requirements in how we ran our operations. So just something to know. Appropriated fund long range capital improvement plan. NAF requirement budget and appropriated requirement budget. funded items, requirements, sections, and entries, justifications. Yeah, this is basically just to say that you have to make sure when you're coming up with a plan that you have a lot of the stuff detailed in your budgeting. Justification, big key there. Why do you need this? What is the purpose of this? And this is what it's used for and whatnot. So that's important. In your budgeting, you have your income and expenses. I'm not gonna get too much into this because this is a little bit in the weeds. I didn't have to do anything specifically around a lot of this, but you just want to make sure that you have just good practice when it comes to income and expenses, and generally you'll have like a finance person within your base that knows probably more about this stuff than I do, and that's another big thing for this is if you find yourself in a position where you're in charge of money, finance is your resource, and that's really anywhere, even at our base. We lean on finance to help us with any of these issues. But every day, I was going over to accounting in Kenya, and we would work on stuff together. And they needed to figure out, how our operation works. So there's a lot of just utilizing of other people. You are a subject matter expert, but as a professional, we like to utilize, there's nothing wrong with utilizing other professions to get the mission done. So just keep that in mind. Net earning objectives, again, 100% must be used in support of deployed personnel, of the NAF generated funds at the deployed location at the contingency. So yeah, just know that when you're I'm not sure why this is in here, net earning objectives. I basically when you're doing a budget, to understand that the money that is obtained is used for this deployed location. And it's in here, but it says deployed personnel. So, I'm assuming that obtained that is for also that it's for DoD personnel that might be stationed out there, contractors that might be stationed there, possibly not local nationals, but maybe foreign nationals, like say in my environment. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff around that, and some stuff you might have to figure out. So financial analysis, cause and effect. Yes, if you're an accounting guru, you'll probably know a little bit more about that. So just understand that when you're doing budgeting and stuff, that there's a purpose, and there's effect. I don't know. I'm not gonna get too much into that. I definitely could probably study that up a little bit more, but for the purpose of this training and you applying what we need to know in a contingency environment, it's probably not that. It is important, but it's probably a little bit too much for this training. All right. So our second keyword is trust. All right. I'm going to come on the camera so you can see me. Trust, integrity, really big key, but the word is trust, not integrity, but it's trust. Kind of goes in the same thing, but and it kind of goes into like, when we send out training and stuff like this, we trust you guys to kind of go through it and get it done. Do it. All right, let's keep moving. All right, NAF accounting system. All right, so we're gonna go through definitions, how to compute selling prices, financial statements. Again, like that last slide on budgeting, you're gonna see some of this stuff, or you're not gonna see some of it. You're gonna have to understand what your responsibility is within the NAF accounting system, and then how to execute it. And again, resources. Utilize finance personnel. Utilize your functional. There are people, and then Air Force Services activity. I call them up and say, hey, well, what is this? What do we need to do with this? So it's there. There's people there. If you're at a senior airman level and in this environment, you got NCOs to kind of help lean on and try to figure out some of this stuff. So don't get too overwhelmed with it. This is kind of really meant for an overview, but we're gonna go through it really hopefully really quickly here. So just understand that there are there's yeah. All right, definitions, accounting equation. Do I need to go through each one of these? Give me 1 second. Yeah, so I'm not going to go through each one of these. Just understand that um, there are when you get into the accounting system, there's you might need to understand the transaction code, the cost centers. That's if this is all associated with it. I never saw any of this for the most part. I think we had a cost center, and it was, it was just our in our AFES operation. It was just our location we had to come up with, and I don't remember doing much other than just on documents that I sent up, we had to provide some numbers and stuff. So let's see where else this training has us go into. Just some basic general accounting lingo. So you have accounting equation. You have assets. So assets basically being your supply on hand. So in our AFES operation, it would be our inventory we had. So all of our chips, candy, toothbrushes, everything. And that would be our assets. And then there you have liabilities. Liabilities are basically things that you might have that might institute as a negative in your operation. So if you have like waste, like items that are damaged or whatever, or you lost, that would probably consider it a liability. And then you have fund. Your equity is the difference between that, and that's just how you calculate your value of your assets. And then all this stuff goes into probably some financial documentation. This is a little bit much. I think it's good general information to know. If you are an accounting expert, or took some financial classes in college or whatever, you probably have a good understanding of this. But just understand that you got assets. And you have liabilities. Fixed assets are tangible. Yeah, I guess I can talk about fixed assets. So fixed assets are tangible items, stuff that you'll have for the lifespan of 2 years. They're permanent items. So in one of our operations, we had a freezer, so we could store items to freeze, and then we could sell the product out of the frozen. So that would be considered a tangible item from that operation. So yeah, like here he goes, like furniture and whatnot. All right, so and then we go into more liabilities. Liabilities are things that we owe. Current liabilities would be something like uh, that would be due in a short time. Trying to think of some examples. Non-current liabilities. Liabilities due for a year or more out. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna run into an operation where you have some of the stuff that you'll have to sort through, and maybe provide numbers or uh, identify any issues you have. So just keep that in mind. Equity asset test ratio. Um, Again, accounting lingo. Um, uh, Current ratio. Vouchers. A general term used to describe any document or evidence a transaction took place. Okay. Here's some more definitions on income and expenses. Income would be like sales. Costs of sales, everything that goes into that. Here's an example of how you compute it. So you have your income. So your beginning inventory would be basically your assets that you have on hand. Your purchases, you're up $50 because you had 50,000 in purchases. You made 10,000 in surcharges, and then maybe there's some rebates and what, and it just basically shows you how to calculate that. So, all right, cost of sales. To calculate all other expenses, percentages, use the total revenue and divide. So here's just basically some more information about obtaining your cost of sales numbers. And so feel free if you guys feel like you want to go into this a little bit. This is basically accounting 101. Yeah, I took accounting and I took finance and in college. Do I remember everything? No. Can I apply some of the logic behind it? Absolutely. I do it in my job. My civilian job, I've done it. I've audited accounting practices in the past. But can I tell you a lot of the how to obtain all this stuff? Probably not. That's what finance is for, to be honest. Um, Operating expense. So you have expenses in your operation. You got personnel expense, support function expense, material related expense, entertainment, promotional expense. You got you might have to buy something to market stuff. This is probably a little bit much for when we're talking about austere environments and a contingency environment. Maybe a bigger base with a bigger budget. I can see where this stuff comes into play. Or especially if you were like the NCOIC or the senior NCOA of OIC or NCOIC of like just NAF operation. You're probably gonna need to know some of this stuff, but really, I like to lean on finance for a lot of this stuff. So you got expenses relating to your operation. And then here are those definitions that we actually were struggling over to get. So, like, yeah, and this is I figured this is what it was. But like, yeah, you have transactional codes. You have your cost center code might be a 2-digit thing. I don't even know if this stuff still applies in this operation. But it'd be interesting if anyone else had firsthand knowledge of it. But it's just good to understand, know that you will have to know this stuff, and a lot of this stuff, if the prior person had a good continuity plan, this stuff would be listed out. Depreciation, obviously you have assets. You might have paid, you know, $2,000 for that freezer with that that you used to sell goods out of, but over the course of 3 or 4 years, that thing might only you could probably only sell it for like $300. So depreciation does have the best example on depreciation is, think about your car. You buy a brand new car for 50,000. Within a year, you pull that off the lot, it's now worth 40,000. You can't sell it for anything more than that. And then a year or two later, that thing's worth 25,000. So that's a lot of heavy depreciation. All right, so let's keep moving. Selling price, how to compute selling price. There you go. Just know that you're gonna have to identify items that you want to sell, come up with a reasonable amount. You might have guidance that limits how much percentage you can upsell something, but just know that you might find yourself figuring that stuff out. So financial statements, MatchCom policy for forwarding. Yeah, for the most part, this goes over. You might have requirements you need to send up to your MatchCom, or in my case, the group or the wing, and then the MatchCom. So a lot of stuff gets, when it comes to money operations, there's a lot of oversight by other upper organizations. So that's end of chapter 3. We'll go over, that's our last word for this is flexibility. So we're in this COVID environment. Our key word that you're going to need to turn into to us is flexibility. So we need to be flexible. All right. Okay. So we're still moving. We got about 5 more slides to go. Blanket purchase. Okay, so we're going over purchasing. So I need to purchase something, right? I need to purchase something for my operation. How do I go about doing it? And this is what we're going to cover. So blanket purchase agreement, also known as BPAs. Actually, the next slide is going to go over that detail. That's just an overview. All right, so blanket purchase agreements. They're a simplified method of purchasing reoccurring needs, negotiated by NAF custodian. That would be like, say, if you were the NCOIC of it, you're the one responsible for it, to basically negotiate that agreement with that, maybe with the help of the contracting officer. That's another resources between your finance rep and your contracting officer. We don't get intimidated by a contracting. It doesn't always have to be an officer. Mine was a tech sergeant. So just utilize these guys, because these guys deal with agreements and contractors all the time, and they're a huge resource for you. So when you see negotiating, as a services, maybe a staff sergeant, you have to feel like you have to negotiate an agreement with a contractor, a local contractor it might be a little bit intimidating, but just know you got your contracting officer to help you through that. So prepaid BPA is preferred. There's some forms you might have to fill out. So, yeah, just lean on your contracting officer for any of this. But you have to understand that the BPA specifically is for something like an ongoing purchase. Hey, we need a contractor to come in and clean out our AFEs once a week. I might do a BPA for that. We might need a contractor to maybe come in and repair some equipment, or provide some other kind of goods on an ongoing basis. All right. Now, the difference between that and just a request for purchase is a one-time item. Say I need that fridge. So we're gonna, it's a one-time item. We'll do a purchase request approved by the FSS commander, with the help from your finance person and your contracting officer. You guys can figure all of this stuff out. All right, so NAF custodian general fund change fund. This would basically be something that if you have this fund, there's a purchase limit that can't exceed $5,000. Again, I'll look down here. Work with your local contracting officer regarding purchases. That's really important, and really, two key people at the base that you really need to have a good relationship with, hopefully you will, is your contracting officer and your finance rep. All right. End of chapter 4. All right. Now we're going into cash and internal controls. Separation of duties. All right. Let's just jump into it. This is what we're going to go through. Controls. What are controls? Controls are things that we have in place to ensure that we have a sound, solid operation, and that it prevents any mishaps, any accounting issues, any inventory issues. So that's what controls are. There's standards out there. Understand what those are. There might be some documentation providing the guidelines. See what those are. Separation of duties. Understand that I am handling the cash, but I might need somebody outside of my department or our organization to maybe audit it. And then there's supervision. So I had a couple people help run our AFES operation, and they, they were, junior, or I would even get someone that wasn't services related coming in there, and, senior airman running the cashier or whatnot. But I needed to make sure that I had, proper supervision over that. They knew what their responsibilities were, and that we, we're monitoring them closely and whatnot. So, and how they handled the cash, how they handled inventory and whatnot. So, and that's a control. Supervision is a control. Separation of duties, all this stuff are different controls. All right. Oh, that was it. Okay. That was really not very long. All right. So chapter 5 review. All right. So we went over NAF accounting, appropriated and non-appropriated budgeting, NAF accounting system, purchasing, cash, and internal controls. All right, and that is the end of this one. We'll be going over block 2 in a different recording. Do we have an end slide? Okay, no. All right, so I will come back on my cam. All right, so thanks for watching. Remember, there was 3 words. You might have to go back and double check what those were. I put the cam on, I think, on each time. So go back and make sure you guys check that out, and then we'll have you guys send those up. But yeah, I hope that was good. I hope it. I know there's some spots where I probably need to figure out how to address that. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask. Um, if something didn't make sense, there was an area that you really wanted to hone in on a little bit, feel free to just let me know. We'll definitely be able to um, go through it with you. So appreciate you. Hang in there. It's gonna be, you know, this COVID stuff is it's interesting, and we're just be just be mindful when you're out and out and about, and be careful and stay healthy. And we appreciate what you're doing. So we will see you later.